there's quite a lot of moving parts to ESB.
There is.
Can you give us a bit of a sense of the organisation?
So we operate right across the value chain. I strongly believe in empowerment. I give direction, obviously, and I set strategy, but I really do let people run their own shows.
Yeah, you're empowering people, but then they just level up and they step up.
If you look at Dublin at the moment, if you look at Microsoft, Meta, IBM, Dell, they're all led by women. Development, take every bit of development that comes your way. We will not succeed in decarbonisation without data and tech playing a pivotal role. We're the first organisation on the island of Ireland to have co-pilot. We have had it now for about 6 months maybe, and we've rolled it out to 300 people. And for me, it's nearly a signal to our people. We will try new things. We will lead in these places. And we have to, if we're going to lead and enable decarbonisation.
Mary, thanks a million. You're very welcome to our Leaders in Tech podcast. Thank you for saying yes.
Thank you, Neil. I suppose it's a pleasure.
Of course it is. Take me back a little bit, if it's okay, to those, I suppose, formative years, some might say, even kind of your childhood and then in secondary, and what kind of led to some of the choices you made into third level. Kind of give me a bit of a whistle stop on that, if you don't mind.
Okay, so I grew up in Kerry, Southwest Kerry, Ivra Peninsula, at the foot of a beautiful mountain called Cnupnadubber, looking out over Dingle Bay. Beautiful place, a great playground, and generally ran wild, I suppose, as a child. I had 2 older brothers and a younger sister, and just really loved being outdoors and, running around that mountain or down at the sea, and farming, loved working on the farm and stuff. So generally a great childhood. I went to school in Carsavine, and didn't go to college, went straight to work after school, and started with An Post, sorting postal orders, worked with Dublin Corpo for a while, paying wages. That was a great learning ground. And then started working for ESB. And that was, started somewhat, I think, maybe like what would be an IT apprentice today. We have IT apprenticeship programs now, which are fabulous on the IT side of things and on the cyber side of things. But back then we didn't. But they had a once-off program where they took 10 school leavers in and trained them in PC skills, as it was known. And that's where my I suppose my IT career started, and worked in wrote PC programs for quite a let's say a year or two. Eventually moved to the IT department. Started my college, let's say, at night in Trinity for 5 years, cycling into Trinity, home 3 or 4 times a week, and then did a postgrad in accounting and finance. So that was hard going, but it was very applied because I was working in the IT department at the time. So the two very much complement each other. It was very applied learning. And I suppose career-wise things took off and got team lead positions. I started there programming, got team lead positions, then moved on. As such, I filled various roles over the years. ESB is a very big organisation. Obviously believes in development in a huge way, like funded all my education. So then I moved throughout our businesses, worked in, I think, all our businesses at one stage or another. And it's somewhat like working in 5 different organisations. And that, again, one of the advantages of working in a place like ESB is that you have that variety and the ability to move. So I moved from what became, let's say, later evolutions of our IT departments out to the various businesses and back in again. I worked in group internal audit. I filled people and change roles as well. So I wasn't always in IT roles. So I had a great variety, both in let's say, across the value chain and in roles.
Okay. And Mary, for those who aren't, for some of our international viewers, like ESB, like they're nearly like 100-year-old business, right? Like give me a sense, or give our audience a sense of the different offerings. Like we would know them. I would personally know them recently with outages, and there's lots of different things. Like the backbone of obviously our infrastructure in Ireland. But there's quite a lot of moving parts to ESB. Can you give us a bit of a sense of the organisation today? And that might be a long answer to this one because there's quite a lot of
1927.
Does it? Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
And it's a great story, I suppose. A man called Thomas McLaughlin convinced the government of the day to spend something like 1/5 of the national budget to harness the power of the Shannon River in the form of the Ardnacrusha power station. And that was a hydroelectric, sustainable power at the time. And then the grid was built, the electricity grid. Another huge thing was rural electrification, bringing electricity to every home in Ireland. So we operate right across the value chain, generation, trade, power. Then ESB Networks is the distribution operator for the Republic of Ireland. And we also have networks in the north of Ireland in NIE. Then Customer Solutions is our retail wing. And in that, there's Electric Ireland, which is the electricity and gas retailer in the south, and also in the UK we have So Energy, and then we have other retail companies, Smart Energy Services and EV charging, and telecoms towers, all in Customer Solutions. Then our engineering major projects business does exactly that, engineering consulting for generation trading and networks, and also for I think about 17 different countries internationally in the form of ESB International. And then our shared service business, Enterprise Services, serves all those businesses in terms of strategic and operational services. So that's the 5 different businesses in one as such.
And you've mentioned lots of different roles within the organisation, and maybe you're a bit too humble and unassuming, but you've obviously, you climbed the ranks and you were given the opportunity. Like, for people that are, I suppose, going through a journey of growth right now and are looking around for opportunities, like, is there any kind of pivotal moments throughout your career that you think, okay, because I made that decision, that's how I got to that, this is how I did that. Like, what is this is about leadership and this is about the journey of leadership. Like, what are there any kind of standout moments that you think kind of really accelerated your growth? Because it's no fluke, it's a big organization, but there's lots of talented people in the organization. You're now the CIO of the organization. Like, so you obviously had to do lots of, really important things and drive a lot of value. Like, any kind of pivotal moments that you wanted to impart
there
today?
There will be a few moments, and I can come back to those. But I think generally, I think it's somewhat different today, and the career progression can be quite intentional. Whereas when I started off, it wasn't that intentional. I would describe it as just like doing whatever was asked of you. And I think sometimes it was what other people saw in me and asked me to do, and positions they put me in, and challenges they gave me that made the difference. I think going out to the businesses and filling different roles in our businesses was important, as opposed to really seeing myself in an IT box as such, So I feel that was important, and moving and being willing to take on challenges wherever they were. I think sometimes I was put in roles that I didn't request or ask. And I remember thinking more than once, oh my God, they expect me to do this. But then 3 months, 6 months, a year into it, you've kind of gone over that overwhelmed stage and you're mastering the role.
But people must have spotted you that, like, so just on that, just so I'm really clear. So if it's just a great example maybe of the culture and people, spotting talent and other people backing you that maybe, well, from listening, maybe didn't back yourself in that particular part, but then someone else did, and pushed you into that role.
Yes, there was definitely one person who really backed me and promoted me. I was working part time. I suppose I've worked on reduced hours or part time for, I'd say, about 18 years of my career. Wow. When the kids were very small, and at one point I got promoted. There were 8 candidates, I think 7 men, one person working part time, and that was me. And I got the I got the gig.
Brilliant.
And that was a senior manager gig. It was my move to senior manager role. And then there were other wonderful bosses who really developed me and, you know, put me in positions that stretched me, but gave me the opportunity to develop and learn and shine, I suppose, you know, when you get the job done. So, yes, I think champions were important.
And has that really, I suppose, developed your leadership now? Like, if you're looking at the people you develop, like, is it because of those role models? Like, what has that meant now in relation to you as a leader? Like, how have you kind of, I suppose, as the All Blacks say, leave the jersey in a better place, you know? Like, what's the...
I strongly believe in empowerment. And I think some people can struggle with that. They expect clear instructions and a lot of direction and a lot of involvement. But I naturally and deliberately I give direction, obviously, and I set strategy, but I really do let people run their own shows. I think always having their backs, you know, that things do go wrong and will go wrong, particularly in the complex organisations we work in today, and with the demands and challenges of decarbonisation, things will go wrong. And having people's backs whilst they have the autonomy, I think that's definitely the best way to develop leadership. And strangely enough, again, going back to, you know, the juggling and working part-time, I think sometimes, you know, when you're looking at talent and you're looking at promoting talent, people working part-time or reduced hours can be, you know, people can think, oh, they're not ready or they're not, you know, willing to, you know, go for the bigger roles. I think it's a way of developing skills, because you very quickly build a very strong team around you. You're absolutely reliant on them. You absolutely empower them and trust them. You develop those skills, you know, in a very real way, because you're not there. Maybe at one point I worked 3 days a week and we had some hairy projects on at the time. I absolutely had to trust my people to get on with it when I wasn't there. Now, they could always contact me and seek my view on something if they needed to. So you delegate very effectively and you plan very well, and your people have autonomy when you're, you know, because you're simply not there all the time. So I think it's actually a way of developing and honing leadership skills.
Okay, so just the sheer reality of the days that you're not there, you have to, you're empowering your people, but then they just level up and they step up.
And you build that really strong team around you.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's a great example, but I would say I'm going to just call it out here. I would say that's not that common, that in the marketplace, right? And, you know, we do leadership search assignments, and when I look at how many opportunities and how many people are given an opportunity to do part-time gigs and still have the same opportunity as full-time, like, that's not that common.
It's probably not. And ESB has always supported me and it's probably about less than half my career now. Can't remember. But and maybe there aren't that many examples of women who have, let's say, succeeded and landed really senior roles whilst working part-time. But it is possible.
Yeah, and I'm just want to highlight it because it's a great example, and I think it's we have an opportunity to talk about it, you know, and get that message out there, because I think the worst thing for us to do is, you know, imagine people don't go for the role, or people don't, organizations don't consciously, you know, direct that it is open for there's lots of different ways to approach the process of hiring people, and, you know, call it out just to try and get more, obviously, talented people into the mix. So I think it's a really good example. Let's stay on diversity and inclusion for a little bit, right? Because I think it's great to see the opportunity that's been presented, that you've earned, and you've come in and you've smashed it, you know, in relation, you've done really strong, but there's still not enough female leaders at C level and on boards in general. We've made progress, but we're still not there just yet, right? I believe, from what I see. And we all have a role to play. In your experience, though, and what you see, like, what more needs to be done and what more can be done to really bridge that gap? And not just for I suppose, the gender, but, diverse groups in general, right? Like, is there any thoughts or any kind of ideas or actions that you think needs to be?
I guess I've no new ideas. And it's a very big question. But I suppose if you look at Dublin at the moment, there's, I suppose, lots of positive signs. If you look at Microsoft, Meta, IBM, Dell, they're all led by women, which is I think is great. It's a good sign. Having said that, when I go to CIO gatherings, I'm very much in the minority, and that would be here in Ireland and abroad. It's it's quite. You go to a big Gartner conference and it's quite distinctive. But unfortunately, there's no silver bullet. And I remember, when I started getting into roles where I was promoting people and, shortlisting and so on. And I'd say, how come there's so few women? And they'd say, because there aren't women in the pool. And I think organisations and we people, we kind of go, oh, right, it's unfortunate there aren't a lot of women in the pool. And that's it, we kind of accept that. Whereas I feel we need to go further than that and say, well, why aren't there women in the pool? Is it at middle management and the women aren't going for the roles? Is it in the intake initially? I think our apprenticeship program is a great example. I think it's 27% of our intake of apprentices for working on the network, electrical apprentices, were women this year. Which is very impressive.
What was it, the previous?
I think a few years ago it might have been 1 or 2 of the 100. Because we're taking about 100 or 96.
Great tangible progress there. Brilliant, yeah.
But hard yards, very hard yards by the people in ESB networks. And very specific actions identified in terms of role modelling and school visits and stuff. So I suppose it goes right back to school. And things like we have the Connected Women in Technology, the teacher program where teachers go into organisations, trainee teachers, and we have 2 teachers each year, or maybe more now, and for them to see the kind of roles we have. And the feedback there is that they would never have realised ESB does these kind of things or has female network technicians or does so much tech and data stuff.
So that storytelling, that awareness is
in
works.
Schools.
Yeah, okay.
But and then we do school visits and we do TY programs and all this. So engagement with the schools, engagement with the colleges. But then I think once we get women in, and we're not getting enough women in, like ESB's 27% female, which is quite low. But obviously we have that challenge of the very engineering tech roles, but great strides being made there, and the apprenticeship program is an example. But once the women are in, I think there's a confidence thing that needs to be addressed, and again, I think particular actions need to be taken there in terms of developing leadership skills and supporting and all those questions. I got I think I told you that story about a couple of years ago when I was speaking at something, and rather than droning on about myself, I asked one of our young grads to help me to get a few of her friends together to see what questions they'd like answered if they were at such a gig with a supposedly senior person speaking. And I thought she'd get 5 or 6 of her mates together, and she got about 35 together on a Teams chat. So we put it out there to them, I'm going to do this talk and I want it to be interesting to a group like yourselves. What questions would you like somebody to answer? And they came back with fabulous questions, but I did have a moment's realisation in all of it, because the questions they came back with were things like, how do you deal with imposter syndrome? How do you cope when you're the only woman in a room? How do you manage how you're coming across when you need to be assertive and you don't want to come across the wrong way as a woman? All those kind of questions. And I thought first, gosh, I don't relate to those questions. You know, they're not relevant to me, I thought. But then when I reflected more and more and more on it, it came back to me that I would have felt the same way when I was at the stage they're at. And it really dawned on me then, I said, oh my God, I've forgotten what it felt like. Or I've blocked it out of my head in terms of what it was like to be a young woman in, let's say, maybe a male-dominated industry, and probably in a male-dominated domain as well. So I had blocked it out of my mind or forgotten about it. And I just said to myself, oh my God, there I am, a senior, influential person, and I've actually forgotten what it feels like. And then I said to myself, and we're expecting men to relate to this as well, you know. So it really showed me the importance for senior people and decision makers to really be tapped into how their diversity groups are feeling, what the experiences they're having, the supports they need, the supports that they would find helpful. So I think it was a dawning moment for me, really.
And if you were to go back a little bit, right, and think, like, any specific examples of like experiencing that and feeling like, because obviously you had to overcome it and you had to dig in and you had to be resilient to get through some of those things that you're feeling. Like, is there any kind of, I don't know, is there any kind of like epiphany moments there that you just, you know, or you just have to just go through it? Like, it's a pity, like, I guess is what I'm saying, right? That's still,
yeah.
Do you still, okay, maybe a better question. Are we getting better at that? You know, like, are we getting better? Like, obviously we will need to work harder to proactively support people and, you know, work hard on that. But like, is it progressing? Like, is it easier, or do you still feel that them girls coming through now that we're talking to you that clearly are, you know, that's front and center in their mind, you know, that hopefully won't hold them back, but potentially could, right? So like, are we dealing with this?
I think there's things for the individual, and then there are things for the system and the organisation. Yeah. And I think in an organisational sense, things are getting better, I hope. And like, I think if you take ESB as an example, we have lots of programmes in place now, are putting more in place, and we have targets in place for the first time ever. Okay. Again, coming up through my career, I would not have agreed with targets. I would have been very, well, I don't need targets, I'm as good as any man. But looking back, I can't go, there should have been targets in place. We need targets. We need to make moves here.
Targets like what? Sorry.
Like more women in the organisation.
Okay, so really measurable
at the different
metrics.
levels.
Okay.
And not only women, all diversity groups.
Sure.
Neurodiversity and everything. And it's such a richness to everything. And at the end of the day, for any customer-facing organisation, you're representing your customer. How can you relate to your customer if your population does not reflect your customer base? So it's like a no-brainer. Yeah. So I think from an organisation and a system perspective, there are things like leadership programs and development programs and female-specific and diversity group-specific supports of various types. And as I say, targets. And then from an individual, I think, well, I suppose the advice I would give would be to be expert at your role. That goes without saying. To become expert at it, build your skills, and let that expertise shine. Because I think that kind of lets any imposter syndrome just float away. If your expertise and your skills are what the focus, where the focus is for everyone in the room, including yourself, And then I think relationships are very important, and you can rely on them in the future, really important. Development, take every bit of development that comes your way. I have had fabulous development, wonderful, at all stages of my career. Technical, leadership, interpersonal,
mentorship and just coaching.
Mentorship, coaching, development programs. There's so much online
internal and
now
external,
as well.
is it?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Fabulous development. And also I think the whole hybrid working and all that gives access to development like never before.
Good point.
Like sometimes in the past you'd have to go to INSEAD in Paris or somewhere really expensive, and you'd be away. If your kids are small, it's trickier. Whereas now you can do a lot of this online and get access to it. It's not exactly the same, but it's It's, I suppose, 80-90% as can be 80 to 90% as effective, I believe. So there is that access now like never before.
I'd like to talk about balancing, I suppose, innovation, right? There's lots of, there's always I don't know, I feel the pace of change is accelerating, but maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm just getting a little bit older. But when I look at, innovation, but stability then, like with a, really important organization like ESB, you as a leader, like when you're trying to kind of develop your teams, develop people, and you're obviously trying to drive innovation and drive value and look at how technology can obviously accelerate some of those initiatives. Can you give us a sense of some of the projects or some of the things you're working on, specifically about the innovation piece? And then the follow-up, I really want to know how you balance that then, and ensure that the stability of the organization isn't compromised.
That's a great question, and it's a question of culture. So definitely come back and ask me that question again. But in terms of some of the projects, so I really see data and tech as being pivotal to decarbonisation. We will not succeed in decarbonisation and enabling decarbonisation for Ireland without data and tech playing a pivotal role. And that's becoming more and more obvious. And I suppose to explain it is like if we all think of our own homes with our EV sitting outside and our solar panels and our heat pumps and so on, the system can't manage my data as, the consumer with it's a dual flow now of electricity. I'm not only taking electricity from the grid, I'm giving my excess solar, my excess EV batteries back to the grid. So all those data points, and you think of every customer having those data points and all that data, it's simply not going to be possible to manage all that data without AI playing a significant role and without software playing a significant role. And the research shows that, the research is that the management of the electricity grid at the moment, about 5% of the spend is on technology and data and software. And as decarbonisation is more and more enabled, that will become something like 22%, I think, somewhere between 22% and 25% by 2040 and so on. So the amount of, let's say, digital stuff in the energy system is going to increase very significantly. And innovation and digital and data and AI and even metaverse is going to play is already playing a significant role. We have about 20 AI use cases already across different parts of ESB, some really, really cool ones. And now we've jumped into Gen AI. We're the first organisation on the island of Ireland to have Copilot. We have had it now with about 6 months maybe, and we've rolled it out to 300 people.
What is that for those that aren't familiar with it?
So Copilot is the inbuilt Gen AI in the Microsoft suite of products. So it's in your Word, your PowerPoint, your Excel, Teams, and so on. So it allows you to summarise, it allows you to create, it allows you to search in a very powerful way. It's a bit like having an intern at your side the whole time doing, let's say, 70 or 80% of the work, and then you'd review the draft or whatever. Like, lovely examples will be doing a draft terms of reference for a review of data in the organisation, say, or creating a job spec, so it'll do 80% of the work and then you apply your judgment. And there's loads of lovely examples, I'm sure, that I'm not giving you the best ones. So being the first organisation on the island of Ireland to roll something out like that is very, very different for an organisation like ESB. And for me, it's nearly a signal to our people that we are innovative. We will try new things. We will lead in these places. And we have to if we're going to lead and enable decarbonisation. Now, again, as I say, it's very different for an organisation established in 1927, always expected to manage large, long-lived assets in a very safe way, all about minimising operational risk, maximising availability, always being there, to be relied upon. So that's a very, it has to be a very risk-averse way of thinking and way of operating. Whereas when you're trying new things, when you're the first to do something in the island of Ireland, and we've had examples on the engineering side as well. We've built the biggest flywheel in the world, and that's really important to balancing the grid when there's a wind and stuff. So that level of innovation and, you know, that level of being brave and trying new things and being the leader is definitely required. And when you consider what the challenge of decarbonisation, when you consider what's ahead of all of us and what we have to achieve,
it's a big
as
ticket
our
item.
chief executive says, there's no cavalry riding in. We have to do our role. We have to lead in our field.
That must be incredibly helpful, right, in relation to retaining good people, giving them the opportunity, even the messaging around that. I would say, if you're talking about developing people and keeping people and, giving people opportunity, that must help when you're doing these kind of things, I would imagine.
Yeah. It's very purposeful. And I think, again, you see, when you talk about diversity and when you're trying to juggle and you're going through your career, having a very clear purpose is so helpful. Getting through hard times or challenging times can be so much more possible when you have a very clear purpose. And I remember coming back from maternity leave once. I think it was on my second child. And when you're on maternity leave, it's obviously very hard work, but in some ways it's a privilege to take a stand back and be away from the organisation and kind of, or the workplace or wherever, and view it more in the world, more so than in your day to day.
Yeah. And
that's a privilege. I call it a privilege that a lot of, let's say, mothers have, that generally men in the workplace don't have, unless you take a sabbatical or whatever. So I remember coming back after, I think it was my second child, I'm not sure, it might have been the third. But, and I was thinking, what am I doing? I'm coming back to an organisation that burns coal, and I'm not even involved directly in doing that. But shortly after that, we revised our corporate strategy and redefined our purpose to be all around decarbonisation, having the infrastructure for decarbonisation, making decarbonisation happen in things like the future role of the DSO, the distribution system operator, and empowering our customers to shift to decarbonised living. So our purpose changed, or to be really focused on that. And I think if I was coming back from maternity leave to that purpose, it will be so much easier than, when we didn't, prior to having that very clear purpose around decarbonisation.
Okay. When you spoke to me about this before, so I just wanted to bring it up because when you're trying to develop leaders, right, people that are highly talented, motivated, ambitious, when you're trying to get people and equally give yourself the opportunity to zoom out a little bit and look ahead at the landscape. But the reality, when you're that busy and there's so much going on and you're sometimes stuck a little bit in the weeds because, there's operational pressure and that kind of... there's a lot of kind of leaders that are going through the ranks at the moment that listen to our podcast and view our podcast that sometimes struggle with this, and they've given us this feedback, right? Mm-hmm. Do you have any tips or things that's worked for you in how you've coached and developed people to make space? Because it's just a big problem, like where there's business complexity, tech complexity, ambition, drive, expectation, multiple projects, family life, work life, all of the stuff, right, that keeps us busy. Is there any, it's probably a difficult question to answer, but is there any kind of thing that you could share? Because it is a challenge, right?
It is, yeah.
Developing people and getting people to really take that time to look ahead and get out of the weeds when there's pressure to get stuff done.
Mm-hmm. And on that front, I'd say, again, there's things for the individual and there's things for the organisation. So, like, we've designed a digital operating model, and we're trying to shift to that and embed that now. And, it really is a big change. But part of it is the very early stage of it, which is around strategic alignment and strategic design. So it's before it comes to tech at all, really. And it's facilitating senior people and maybe not so senior people to think in an unconstrained way. And it's very hard for people to do that because, as you say, they've so many operational imperatives and challenges and things happening in, you know, really heavy duty, big roles. And facilitating them to, using design thinking to facilitate them to put the operational challenges aside, put the implementation challenges aside, and just reimagine the future. What should your business look like? What should it look like? And the natural way is that people start bringing in the implementation challenges and the delivery challenges. So we try to facilitate them to put those aside again and focus on the future and think future and then work back from that. So that's what we need to get to now. What's the path to get there? And yes, of course, there'll be various challenges. There'll be funding challenges. There'll be IR challenges. There'll be various resourcing challenges. But those are implementation challenges that need to be tackled rather than what's your strategy, what's your vision for the future. So our operating model tries to facilitate that way of thinking. Okay. And I think it's important for an organisation to have an operating model that does that and gives people the space to, reimagine the future of their business. So from an individual perspective then, what I coach my gang to do is use reflection. And little kind of tips or habits there. I give each of my leadership team a notebook, a blank notebook. And it's kind of symbolic in that it's the same notebook for each one of them. And I sometimes would ask them, how's your notebook going? How full is it? And, so they're meant to use it for reflection.
Okay. Do you get to read it?
No. They do wave it at me from time to time too. Yeah. I suspect with one or two it's used for the recipes for the kitchen or the gardening tips. Set the spuds on such a date or whatever.
No, I do get it. It's nearly making them conscious of that. That is something that we've discussed, and we do need. Yeah, okay. So the symbolism of that. Okay.
I think role modelling is important there. Now, I'm not always the best role model, but to actually say things like, "Oh, I'm just going to reflect on that, and we'll chat about it again. Let me reflect on it, and we'll chat about it again." Rather than just racing to an answer.
When you're looking at communicating, right? Wins or trying to get budget and presenting to boards and trying to kind of manifest things and trying to, like, it's good to know that the spend is going to go up and there's a necessity for that, and it sounds like there's buy-in from the top down. But if you were to reflect, passing your word, at your journey and even mistakes or things that you've had to work on, when you've had to present and you tried to get stuff done, or even stuff that you got wrong, like, are there any kind of moments throughout your career that you've been like, okay, that didn't work because of that, and this is what I learned from it? Or more about, how we communicate effectively and how we kind of get spend and how we get buy-in and commitment and all the other stuff that's necessary to really kind of push these big ticket items over the line. Like, is there any things that's coming up? Oh,
there's loads. I mean, there's loads of, let's say,
get vulnerable here now. Tell me about your mistakes
along the way. But I'd say overall, I used to be very hard on myself when I made mistakes, and when things didn't go wrong or didn't go well, I'd be kind of beating myself.
Very self-critical, really.
Yeah. Okay. But I consciously, at some point, I can't remember when this was, I consciously made the decision, no, that's not good for me. Instead, I'm going to say, okay, that went belly up, but what did I learn from it? And I consciously, to build my resilience, I consciously did that. I made the conscious decision to do that.
By yourself? That was just on you?
Oh, I'm sure somebody advised me as well. But it was a conscious decision, and it was a switch. And I try to coach my people to do that now. When I see them worrying too much about things, I try to get them to say, look, just take a learning from it. Now you'd have to ask them, is that what I really do? But I try to do that, sure. Because things won't always go right. But value and business cases is one where I made mistakes. and articulating the value of things. It can be very hard. It is a very hard area for organisations. And I
try to predict though without, you don't have all of the data, right? When you're trying to do something new, right? When you're
Yes, and I think I overly focused on financial value of digital, say, when it is only part of the value. In that obviously there should be financial value, and it should be it should come out of your business plans. It should be there in your business plans, owned by business managers, not owned by the CIO as such. But also the value of strategic enablement. And there could be lots of investments that you'd overlook because there isn't a financial return, but what something enables you to do in terms of strategy or strategy enablement, would be significant. And then the third bucket from, is risk and risk mitigation. Again, there may be no financial gain, but you could, let's say, reduce, and cybersecurity is a big example there, where really to keep pace with the threats, it just requires further and further investment.
Is that on the is that on the agenda a lot? Like, because I do speak to CIOs, it's always, just the reality of the sheer sophistication of that threat landscape and how quick, how we all need to invest and double down on that. But is that, that's still very much front and center,
And it's my number one priority. And I remember when I was first appointed to my role, articulating that my first priority was cybersecurity, and receiving some negative feedback saying, it can't be, digitalisation has to be your first priority. But we won't achieve much in digitalisation if we're not, really focused on cybersecurity.
Why do you think there was pushback on that? Just
maybe they considered it just a hygiene factor, But I thought it was important messaging for all everybody that worked in not just in the IT roles, even across the whole organisation, that it's everybody's personal responsibility, cybersecurity, and that's the kind of culture we've been kind of nudging along, and for everyone to feel a personal responsibility around cybersecurity, whether it's a simple. And the example I gave is we have a marketing intern who's come into the organisation. They have a personal responsibility. They need to feel a personal responsibility, as well as the CISO teams. Have they done their training? Do they never click? And so on, And that's what you need. You need everybody in that.
So that culture of awareness, that culture of everyone has to own their role in the.
Yes, that's what we try to promote and raise awareness around and communicate about.
I was fortunate to visit the state-of-the-art facility that is ESB's headquarters in Dublin. It's very impressive. It's a wonderful place. It seems to be just an incredible place to work. How would you describe it? And can you give a sense for some of our viewers who weren't? It's
lovely.
Yeah,
it really is. And it's really sustainable. It's
the bees. What was the bees? The honey. Remember you were showing
we have bees. Yeah, but I guess that's just maybe a symbol.
Sorry, that was just something I liked.
In terms of how the building is designed, it's highly sustainable. There's some lovely stat about the million square, how many times over in terms of the CO2 that it's minimising or whatever. My memory of the stats on that one is poor, but it's a lovely building to work in. It must have been designed around the person because, for example, you walk much more. You're inadvertently encouraged to walk more. The lifts are further away than the stairs. The stairs is nice and wide, and there's like 3 steps one way, then 4 steps another way. So you never feel like you're walking up a big long stairs. Instead, you're just small things like that. And then you meet people a lot, going between different places. Now we probably don't have enough due to the nature of work changing. Whilst we probably it was designed pretty much with hybrid working in mind, probably not as aggressively in that direction as it needed to be, like because it was during COVID and it was all that time when we were really switching to hybrid working. So we probably need more meeting rooms than we have because of the way work has changed. But there's lovely meeting spaces and very nice gathering spaces.
No, it's wonderful. It's great to see. And I would say that really helps for retaining and attracting people. And, you know, people's place of work is important to them, right? So
it is.
It's great, a great example. So just with our future lens on here then, I mean, you've touched on some of these use cases around innovation and some of the AI stuff that you're doing, not only out in the field. I know you've spoke to me about some of the towers and some of the safety and some of the real kind of really important, vital use cases. But when you look ahead now, well, how excited are you about the kind of next couple of years then in your role and in ESB? Like, what's kind of
I think it's a really
motivating you the most?
Yeah, I think it really is. Like, I think to be working in our sector right now is such an exciting and challenging time. But to be working in data and tech in our sector right now is just another level of potential and excitement again, you know. I think I feel we're kind of nearly at the table like never before. And data and digital is one of ESB's 7 strategic objectives. So it features in our corporate strategy for the first time ever now, which is wonderful. So I think it's a really exciting time.
Well, look, it's been an absolute privilege chatting to you. Thanks again for saying yes. A real example, a real inspiring example of a great leader in Ireland. And wish you nothing but continued success. So thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Neil.
All right, good on you.